Hey y'all, Emu here, and welcome back to another episode of the Talk Emu podcast. This is going to be more of a focused topic this time around. We're going to be looking into specifically the works of one particular game developer. Today, I wanted to take a look at the games created by Davey Wreden. Davey Wreden is a kind of small-time developer, though um, his games are very well known. At least one of his games in particular is very well known, and definitely more on the PC space. And I wanted to talk about his three games and get into kind of the intricacies of the philosophy behind his games and kind of the similarities of the stories that he tells and how each game kind of attacks a similar topic from a different angle. Um, Davey Wreden uh, likes to kind of center his games around the creative process itself. Likes to center them around themes of like self-discovery, uh, understanding oneself from a creative perspective, uh, as well as topics of finding one's passion, losing one's passion, burnout, things such as this. And I think there's some good kind of philosophical um, themes that you can gather from his games. Now, of course, his three games are his first game, which was originally a Half-Life mod, the Stanley Parable, which is easily his most famous and recognizable, which just recently had its deluxe edition released. I think it might have been a year ago by this point, actually. I say recently, but I always forget how fast time goes. It might have actually been a year or two by now. But so then he also then out of nowhere he released a game called The Beginner's Guide, which is not as well known as Stanley Parable, but it still definitely gets some recognition. I've seen a lot of playthroughs of it on YouTube, a lot of reactions to it. And then his most recent game, which came out either this year or last year. Well, not this year. This year just started, but came out like either 2025 or four. I don't remember, but um, that's called Wander Stop. Now, I do want to say real quick, there's probably going to be a time in this video. I'm going to try not to. There's a indie game out there called Wander Song. I apologize if I accidentally call Wander Stop Wander Song. If you saw my Warhammer video, you know that I mix things up with similar names very easily. so, I'm saying it now because even in my last video, I misspoke a lot and had to like edit in um, little like annotations of words I said wrong. But, um, all right. So first, I'll talk about Stanley Parable, the heavy hitter of the three. Stanley Parable is kind of the outlier of these three in a way. Stanley Parable is obviously a very silly and ridiculous story, a very absurd um, tale, but it it touches on themes of like breaking norms, going against like the common flow, venturing into the unknown, um, dealing with concepts of exploration, complacency, and control. both taking control and losing control. Um, there's obviously, if you know Stanley Parable, you know there's a lot of endings associated. All three of these games that Davey has made all kind of have very different styles of how they play. With Wanderstop being the most diverse of the gameplay styles, but for Stanley Parable, basically you're walking through a game. It's a walking simulator type game, and you have a narrator that's telling you what to do, but you can choose to go against the narrator and take things into your own hands, and you get a whole bunch of different endings depending on what you do and don't do. And kind of the whole point of the game is going through the cycle over and over and over, explaining all the different endings, with the end never being the end. Um, and there's lots of themes of like destiny and fate. But in the main, like, if you follow the story the way it's intended, then basically Stanley finds a mind control device and can either destroy it and be free, or attempt to control it, and he is punished for doing so by losing his life. Um, but the narrator explores kind of other facets of Stanley's life, painting a not so pleasant picture of what his life might be like outside the office. Of course, we can't really trust the narrator. Um, the narrator kind of switches between friendly and villainous on a whim. But basically, the main premise of the game is the fact that Stanley works in a job where he just presses buttons. He just receives orders to press buttons over and over and over. And all his coworkers think it's like the worst job in the building, but he's genuinely happy. Now, of course, in the main story plot, you find out that all the workers are just being mind controlled. Um, so kind of hinting at the fact that Stanley wasn't truly happy with his job, that he was being forced to feel that way. Um, and then there's one ending where Stanley returns home to his wife, but everything is fake. His wife is a mannequin, and then slowly, as he's trying to do normal things and live his life, the apartment starts to transform back into his office, and he's right back at work. So as silly and goofy as Stanley Parable is, I think it definitely kind of shows the concepts of like being trapped in work, not having a good work-life balance, trying to find purpose and meaning in a day-to-day 9 to 5 job, or like a dead-end job where you don't really have any ways of advancement or creative output. Your life just becomes work day after day. And as much as you might try to convince yourself that you're happy, there's always a piece of you that is just yearning for freedom, for creative output. And I think Stanley's ability to go against the narrator kind of shows that rebellious nature that lurks within people who are not being fulfilled, whether it be creatively or emotionally or physically. There's always a part of us that desperately wants more from our lives. Next game, the second game Davey has released, The Beginner's Guide. Now, from a gameplay perspective, Beginner's Guide is similar to Stanley Parable in that it is a walking simulator type game, but instead of like making choices and exploring, you have to follow a specific path. And the narrator is not a character in this. The narrator is Davey, or a fictionalized version of Davey, who is just guiding you through a bunch of examples and a bunch of set pieces and feeding you a story. And you might occasionally have to click a button or um, press like a dialogue option or something like that, shoot a gun for a second, but there's no real gameplay mechanics to it. There's no real objective other than just following Davey alongside him on this tale. And but the themes and the narrative of Beginner's Guide is much different from Stanley Parable. This is a story of self-destruction, loss of purpose, desperation, self-hatred, depression, and a lack of creative freedom. Uh, Basically, the story of Beginner's Guide is about a fictional version of Davey and a fictional friend named Coda. And basically, Coda is a small-time game developer who's just making these quirky little games, these little set pieces in the Source engine with no real objective or goal. And he allows Davey to view his work, and Davey loves it. And Davey starts telling him things that he should do, things he should change, and Coda really doesn't like that. And they often argue over what a game should be, what constitutes a game. Coda is much more liberal in his way of designing games, and he doesn't believe that games should necessarily be playable or solvable, that whatever he creates is like a living piece of art. And Davey looks at it from a much more traditional standpoint that games should be playable, games should be winnable, the player should have fun playing the game. And then it's revealed, the spoiler alert for the plot, he basically starts changing his games behind his back and showing them to people, hoping that like the feedback will make Coda want to make more games. But you find out that it was actually just Davey wishing that he could be like Coda and wanting people to appreciate him. So he was using Coda's art to get people to like him instead of Coda. And Coda abandons game development and disappears. And Davey has realized the error of his ways and is desperately trying to reconnect with his friend. And it is a very sad, warped story that just kind of like hits home because it's so like not necessarily relatable. But it's like it's real. It's real. It's something that you could see really happening, or you could easily understand feelings like that. But what's really sad and depressing about this game is as you are going through the games, Coda's games become darker and darker and very sad. There's like one game where you're in a lecture hall as a student looking at the professor, but then you switch perspectives to the professor, and behind the lecture hall is like an eye of doom, like a black hole sucking in everything, destroying the universe. And no matter how hard you try to warn the students, you can't get the message out. And there's also a lot of symbolism throughout the game of like light posts and doors that they can't open without expanding their creative mind. A lot of themes of prisons and being trapped. There's, of course, I'm blanking now on the. Oh yeah, there's like one game where throughout the whole time there's just this like crying woman sobbing in the background as you're like these words of like self-hatred and depression are like coming at you. And there's also one where there's you're on a stage and you have to like ask a girl out, but every time you attempt to talk to her, you get pulled back and gates start to like bar around you and you get blocked off from everyone. And one of the games is there's a machine that like creates things and everyone loves it, but then people start to tamper with the machine and the machine stops creating art and the people are outraged and they want to destroy it. And I think that's kind of reflective of Davey inserting himself into Coda's art and Coda not wanting to make games anymore, but Davey just continuing to harass him about it. Um, but this game very much just paints that image, just that struggle of an artist who is trying to do something for fun as an escape, and it just frustrates and consumes them. Um, and then it just paints this really sad truth of what it's like to be a creator, whether it's being a game developer or making music or writing or anything like that. Everyone falls into these pits of doubt and frustration. And of course, like when you try to share things with someone or you try to endeavor in a creative process collaboratively with another person, that they can taint your art or the thing that you loved. And then we have the third game, which is a much more upbeat Wanderstop. Wanderstop is very different from the other two games in that it's actually like a full game. You actually do things. It's like a third person game. It's very much it's kind of like one of those like cozy chore games like Animal Crossing or something like that, but it's a bit more involved. I feel like there's a lot more kind of work and thinking involved in the game. But as much as there is a lot of chores and tedious tasks, the game is constantly reminding you that you can just stop. You can just chill, do something else. There's no time limits. There's no wrong answers. There's no mistakes. There's no game overs. If you get something wrong, you can just try again and again at your own time. Wanderstop is a story of reflection, letting go, resting, acceptance, burnout, rediscovery, perspective, and understanding um, the concept of boredom from a different perspective. Seeing boredom as a luxury and not a curse. Um, Wanderstop tells the story of a girl named Alta who is the best fighter in the world, the greatest champion, could not be defeated. And then suddenly she starts being defeated and losing, and she cannot fight anymore. She loses the ability. She starts lashing out, starts becoming something other than herself. And she finds herself in this magical clearing in a magical forest with a elaborate tea shop called Wanderstop, run by a mysterious magic man named Boro, who is probably one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Um, and basically, the whole game is Alta, you playing as Alta, running this tea shop, um, performing requests for customers, but each customer brings with them a different tale, a different story, um, usually a sad one, and you have to basically help them reflect and help them achieve their goal, and by helping them learn how to relax and focus on positive things. And Alta is constantly being faced with the frustration of not being able to do what she loves, what she's the best at. And over the course of the game, she's basically faced with this concept that she might never be able to do it again, and having to come to terms with that. Um, each character that stops at the tea stop, tea shop store, each character brings with them a different story, and everyone is kind of dealing with something. Um, but I think one of the most important, obviously, Monster is a very important character. She's a little girl that reminds Alta a lot of herself. Um, Alta wants to be an amazing fighter. She wants to be strong and powerful. Not Alta, Monster. Did I say Alta? I meant Monster. Blah. Uh, but Alta does not want Monster to be like her and end up in the same place that she's in. Um, and it gets very emotional, and There's another character. Um, Forget this character's name, but they're basically this cosmic entity. They're this like god. I think their name's like Nebula or something. But they're literally like a cosmic force of everything. They are everywhere and nowhere at once. They are infinite, and they have seen the creation of life. They have seen the secrets of the cosmos. They know everything. They are life itself. They are existence and reality. But alongside this cosmic entity are these weird little businessmen, almost identical. And they just come out of nowhere. They just start multiplying. You have Larry and Jerry and Terry and is it Barry? I don't remember. But and they're all looking for like this boardroom to give their presentation, and it's all these very mundane presentations of like work management and stuff like that. And they're all like looking for coffee, and they're very like mundane and nonchalant. And this cosmic entity adores them, is fascinated by them. And Alta cannot understand how this cosmic being of infinity would want to be like one of these businessmen. And over the course of this chapter of the game, the cosmic force starts to look more and more like one of the businessmen. And the cosmic force promises to help Alta, but when Alta needs them the most, they transform fully into one of the businessmen, going by the name of Gary. And to me, what I think this represents is you have this character, Alta, who is the best of the best, and then just crumbles and is frustrated, burnt out, angry at herself and others, and just cannot understand what she needs to do to be better and cannot grasp the concept of letting go and accepting. Then you have this cosmic entity, this being that is incomprehensible to the human mind, that has seen the ends of the cosmos, has seen infinity and life and singularity and everything and nothing all at once, that can make life appear, that can make life thrive, can create anything it dreams of. But it looks at these mundane, normal workers and it envies them. It doesn't want to be a god. It doesn't want ultimate power. It just wants to be normal. It just wants to live a life without needing to be responsible for anything, without needing to be this brilliant force. It just wants to be normal. And I think that's one of the most brilliant and touching characters of the game, is that we have people that have everything and people that don't have everything. All they want is to have everything. People dream of riches and glory and fame, but the people that have that, the people at the top, they're lonely, they're empty, and they just want to go back to a life where no one expected anything of them, nobody cared who they were, and they could just be normal and relax and enjoy the simple parts of life. And this is something that Alta can't seem to understand, at least not till the end of the game. But the whole time you have Boro, and Boro is the most simple, pleasant, just fulfilled man. Boro wants nothing, needs nothing. He just wants to enjoy life and help others enjoy it too. He enjoys being bored, because being bored means there's nothing being asked of you. Being bored means that you don't have any problems. You just exist. Boro likes to make teach for people and have them experience new things. He likes to guide people and show them the simplicities of life and that failure is okay and that you don't need to be anything other than just what you are. Oro is delighted at everything and alarmed by nothing. When Alta brings possible concerns and dangers to Boro's attention, Boro says, "Cool, let's do nothing." And as much as complacency can be a bad thing, being able to accept yourself, being able to accept what life has given you and just be happy with it. And this is the lesson that Boro tries so desperately to teach Alta. And it's not till the very end that she finally understands that she just needs to let go. Now, there's a slight alteration in the ending. Alta can become a fighter again. She does reach this point where she is able to reclaim her strength. Or you can just wait, and the player doesn't really know what happens to Alta. Doesn't really know what becomes of her, if she becomes a fighter again, if she picks a different path in life. But what's important is that Alta has learned to accept this and move on. There's also another character whose name I'm not remembering, but he is also a fighter like Alta. He looked up to Alta. Alta was his hero. And when Alta can't fight, he doesn't understand it and thinks that she's just in her head and she just needs to toughen up and get over it. And he berates Alta for her weakness and her inability to fight. And he comes across as really rude, but I can understand that he's just trying to motivate her, even if he's coming across very harshly. And you can actually choose in the game to be rude to him or to just let it go. But this character ends up suffering almost a similar fate. He gets too cocky and he loses his arm and he starts to just lose the sense of himself. And it's almost like this character is showing what would have happened to Alta if she hadn't lost the ability to fight. If she hadn't gotten burnt out, that she might have become something worse and would have died or have just lost all ability and have just learned to hate herself for it. And this is what is so great about Davey Wreden's games. What I love so much about it is he's able to he just takes these concepts, these basic concepts that I think everyone can understand and relate to about purpose, self, and creativity. It doesn't even have to be from a creator standpoint. It can just be anyone in a day-to-day job, any craft, any job, anything like that. Everyone experiences these kinds of feelings um, and these kinds of issues. And I just really like that Davey's able to take these relatable concepts and just turn it into this fun art. Um, whether it be a ridiculous, goofy story like Stanley Parable, a more deep, dramatic tale like Beginner's Guide, or a whimsical, laid back, calm adventure like Wanderstop. And I think that's really all I have to say. Um, I'm obviously a big fan of Davey Wreden's games, and I can't wait to see what he makes next. I'm really looking forward to another game by him if he chooses to make one. But even if he doesn't, think he has already created a good legacy of games um, that are just very um, evoking of feelings and thought, but are also fun and full of original ideas and creativity. And it's just really nice to see a developer like this, especially today where it seems like game development and creativity has just disappeared, where people are just making the same uninspired slop over and over with no real sorts of direction, just wanting money and acclaim. And we see ideas just being so recycled and unoriginal. And I really appreciate what Davey's doing with his work. So that's really all I wanted to say. This wasn't really meant to be like a video essay or anything like that. This is just me expressing my thoughts and feelings about his games and what they mean to me. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking Moo podcast. And I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.